everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cryptocurrent. Your host here, Richard Carthon. And today I have a special guest all the way out in South Korea working on a really cool gaming blockchain project that you need to be paying more attention to because they have a lot of really cool stuff in the pipeline. We have Kijun, who is with Planetarium. How are you doing today?
Hey, great. Thank you, Richard, for inviting me.
Of course, happy to have you here. Before we learn more about all the amazing things at Planetarium, first want to learn more about you. Can you give us a little bit of background on yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Kijun Seo, CEO of Planetarium, which is developing technology and content for decentralized gaming. So, like the background, we started it all off as a internet gamer, early 1995, 1996, when I was dialing into, online games with a modem and playing a bunch of games. But I never thought I would be working on a video game company myself, and I graduated from Caltech as the Big Bang Theory school, majoring in computer science. Did a bunch of internet projects. Worked at, actually, my first company was at Nexon, which is the number one game company in South Korea. I was working on mobile games at the time. And then, moving on, I worked at Dropbox for a couple of years, doing engineering projects with it and real-time engineering projects in the cycle. And, I took a few years off, did a bunch of random projects like indie games, a lot of projects related to art. And then, coming full circle, I started Planetarium back in 2018, and we've been going on for, quite some time.
Right. No, that's awesome, man. And as you started to go through your process of working at the various elements in stages of your life, you always knew that you wanted to be in gaming, but what was that first intersection into crypto? How did you first learn about it? And how did you learn wow, I can bring this passion of crypto into gaming?
Yeah, it's really funny because, I met crypto when I was actually taking some years off, and I never really thought about starting a company or doing, something in the crypto scene. I mean, I've known about Bitcoin and Ethereum. Actually, so after working at Dropbox, I had close friends actually working on Ethereum even since 2015 and 2016. They've always told me to get into it, but I was like, I want to work on creative projects and personal projects, and getting involved with another organization didn't seem something that I was interested. But and in 2018, a friend of mine was working on an open source game project based on his own homegrown blockchain. And I think the idea of open source online game, just put it together, it was very compelling to me because as a software engineer, I knew the power of open source projects, but then none of the commercial projects are really open source or something that you can hack easily on. So, and especially the online games, you play a game on your mobile phone and you can't change anything about that. But being able to build a game as open source and, able to hack on it kind of you're hacking on Ethereum network or whatever. So that seemed really interesting. So I started, helping out a little bit of time, and then this really quickly, 7 or 8 people joined and started becoming a company very quickly. So I took over as a CEO. I've had some startup experience before. So we built the team, and here we are. We're currently about 30 plus people, and with a internal game studio and also a tech team. So this is really, I would never really imagine something like this.
This is awesome. And to be in this space at this time, I think is super crucial. I mean, for everyone that's been listening on the show, multiple guests have said crypto gaming is something you need to be looking out to and paying attention to. And this is that moment to where you can kind of get an inside look at what's going on and why you should be paying attention to this. Fairly quickly, you brought up open source internet gaming. Can you explain a little bit of what that means in a couple of examples?
Yeah. So where should I start from? So, for example, you look at World of Warcraft, right? It's a city with, it used to have 13 million people dialing in, I say dialing in. I don't know why I say dial in, but 13 million people playing every month. And, it used to, it's like an entire city scale. But as a player, what can you do about the infrastructure of World of Warcraft? Or can you change any balances? Or can you actually make meaningful contribution that actually upgrades the game? And I think what's interesting is when you think, so there was a phase in World of Warcraft where Blizzard decided to bring Cataclysm by changing the old worlds and actually changing the entire map into a new map. And some people just wanted to stay in the old world with the old scheme and decide, hey, like Blizzard is always moving on, changing content that we used to love. So can we actually get together and make actually re-engineer the World of Warcraft server into a private server so that like we can play with our friends? And that community, which was called Nostalrius, grew to 1 million people, like 1 million users, which is, I mean, obviously not good for Blizzard's business, right? So they sued the server and shut it down. But I think there's a very interesting demand where, in online games, people tend to self-organize, but then, most games are centralized in that, the game company owns the server, owns the code, owns the content, owns the asset. Your account inside World of Warcraft is actually not yours. It's like you sign the EULA when you first begin. So when we think of digital ownership and when we think of the content and data that we're creating on the network, none of this is actually ours. And I think when you look at online games especially, it's a community of people connecting. As a virtual community, we wanted to make sure that the infrastructure could also belong to the community. So it's not, so the Nine Chronicles, which is a game that we're creating, is fully open source. It's been open for about a year and a half. We develop and open source everything that we do so players can take it and even, fork the network, make their own version of Nine Chronicles, whatever. We think it's really important to the virtual community of, we have about 30,000 users on our Discord. And, like that community is very, very active and passionate because they know that this code and the data actually belongs to them, not to like us. So that's a really good way to build relationship with your new users.
No, that's great. And I think that's a really good illustration of open source and why open source in gaming is really big. So to kind of just play it back to you. So you think about like a World of Warcraft, they have this map, they had a pretty set and standard, and you don't really own anything. And if you want to make a change, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. You're kind of at their mercy. Whereas with open source and the game and what y'all are building at Planetarium and other places like it, you're giving ownership to your community and to people who want to come and build on it and can have their own iterations and be providing value to this platform that ultimately you're making. You're giving them the keys to the kingdom, if you will, that they can choose to use however they want or build upon however they want.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's, open source gaming could exist before blockchain. Obviously, like you can just open source the code. But I think the biggest change is that now the data itself is open source. Before, the data is saved on the server. So, someone needs to monetize from that because obviously, how do you keep the costs running? But it's very different now. Like people are, we have like 2,000 nodes, 2,000, 3,000 nodes running on a given day. And that's because they want to play. And that's because some people want to like mine the token. And, it's all voluntary. We don't like ask people to run the infrastructure.
No, that's awesome. And they're building infrastructure in for the newbies out there building out the nodes and why that's important. And you're helping to build out the platform and infrastructure and showing the value of wanting to be on Planetarium. On that, I know that you have a game, I believe, that y'all are launching right now or has launched and is doing pretty well. Do you want to spend some time talking about that?
Yeah. So, put everything into context. Planetarium is creating core technology for decentralized games, open source decentralized games. And we also build and incubate content. I think the technology itself is a way so you can take our technology. It's called Live Planet, and you can take it and then make your own blockchain network specialized for your game. So that's like a blockchain SDK that we give out so that game companies and developers can build their own network, not like put their network on Ethereum, but be able to actually make a protocol that actually suits their game. So that's our technology side. But yeah, Nine Chronicles is our first game. It's made from in-house since 2019, and it's a idle RPG game where you go into multiple worlds inside Nine Chronicles and you defeat stages to collect ingredients. And with those ingredients, you can actually forge NFTs, items such as like armors or gears, and you can equip them to face better foes. There's a PvP element where you can play and earn with people inside Nine Chronicles. And I think what's interesting is, so, like player wise, we have about 35,000 users, 40,000 users. And, they're very, very active. I think what's interesting is that, we don't run any servers on this, which is, I think at this phase, I would like to ask the community, especially the gaming community, blockchain gaming community, to start thinking of, fully actually decentralizing their games, as opposed to just putting the NFTs on, on the network. Because, like in this way, for example, Nine Chronicles can actually function perpetually, even without us running the background servers and software. So I think it's difficult to make things fully decentralized, and but I think we're showcasing through Nine Chronicles that it is playable. Also, as our partners, like Ubisoft, one of the biggest game companies in the world, is also a partner with us running node infrastructure on.
That's awesome.
It's been kind of crazy. And Animoca recently also invested. Animoca is also an investor and pioneer behind the Sandbox and Axie Infinity, and it's been great to work with them. So
big names, yeah.
I mean, it's crazy, because if you told me that these big names would be interested in like open source gaming back in 2018, I'd be like, I don't know.
Nah. And it's come full circle. But to your point, they're seeing the future, and the future is, and always has been, gaming for a lot of people, because you talked about the community that comes out and how ferocious and like amazing these people are, just absolutely enamored with the worlds that they become a part of. And knowing that people like the ability to have more ownership and building out those infrastructures, because you look at the model like a World of Warcraft, it's been around for decades. And what is keeping the people around is that community that they've been able to build. But now you're being able to take something like that and be able to go interoperability and be able to have these NFTs from one game and be able to bring it to another and bring it up over to another. And that is so much value that just hasn't existed. And so if you can be at the forefront of creating that for people, I mean, I think this is what we're looking at as we go into the next phase of the world of gaming. I mean, what is your perception as we look at you look at the last decade of gaming and how far we've come? I think we're still at the beginning phases of blockchain gaming, but where do you think it's headed as we look into the next decade?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's right now, I think we're in a really interesting transition phase where studios start to work differently with their users. It's not users anymore. It's like community and actual creators inside the ecosystem. And you're not really building like a content that people can consume, but you're building something composable that other people can take and build something on. So, just from the macro perspective, if let's say, if there was like one company that could work on DeFi applications and Ethereum itself was like a black box sealed, then like none of this thing would happen. But, we can do things, we can do really creative things, because ERC20 can be like, you can do stuff with it. It's composable, programmable, and anybody can put their ideas in there. So I think I look at projects like Loot Project, for example, where, it's like really simple metadata. Like you open up a loot box and, you get like sword +2. What does that even mean? But then like you actually do stuff with it. And I think, us being able to provide utility based on just like really simple abstract data is like what's bringing the revolution into NFT. And I think, as a company, we want to make sure that like code and everything can be something that people can play with. And that's, we're also really interested in incubating content with other studios and other models that really want to make sure that, the gaming stays an open place.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept. And just to spend a little bit more time on that. So if someone owned a Loot and all of a sudden they want to come on one of Planetarium's Systems, one of the games, would they be able to take that NFT and be able to play with it? Or is the idea to be able to create a system or platform to where anyone can create some sort of coded language NFT and then be able to bring it into one of your games?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a little bit far off in the future, but I think let's say someone said, "Hey, I want to use a loot sword and inside the game and build some module to support that." Then the community can decide, hey, maybe we want to integrate loot into Nine Chronicles. So what's interesting is that as a game, like you need to think about balance in some way. So for example, like Nine Chronicles is a fantasy based game. Like, is it okay if you bring a car into Nine Chronicles? I mean, that's for the community to decide, I think. And I think what's interesting is that you can make a decision to say, hey, like, let's give more points to people who have loot inside their Ethereum, like MetaMask wallet, because we will be able to actually cross share users between them. And I think, that's a very practical way to try things. And yeah, definitely I can see some of this happening with the games that we're developing and incubating.
But you just brought up another interesting concept, and like I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but it's a really interesting idea of you build a particular game, a fantasy game, and now all of a sudden, someone wants to bring in a spaceship, or someone wants to bring in a monkey sword or something like that has nothing to do with the game at all. Like, do you allow it? Do you let the community decide, like, hey, do y'all want this here? Like, that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, I want to dive a little bit into it if you're interested, because I think the idea of forkable gaming is a really interesting idea for us. So for example, like Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SP, I mean, they all have different ideologies of some sort, right? But they're all, started as a root, their root is based on, the original Bitcoin network. And I think what's interesting for us is, so for example, let's say someone wants to bring a spaceship and maybe 30% of users want to, and about 70% don't want to. Then the 30% can say, hey, like, maybe we'll just fork the network and start, Nine Chronicles with spaceship. And you can't do that in previous gaming, but you can totally do that with online games. And I think that is actually, like history of, for example, like if you're familiar with the history of Dota and League of Legends, it started out as actually a StarCraft map, but someone took it and then said, hey, like, I want to fork this and make something new on top of it and add new characters. And they didn't even get permission to do this. They just did it because
they just did it.
And then when a map editor would look at some other map and say, hey, like that version of Dota has that character and it looks kind of cool. I want to bring that in, bring that mechanics in. So you have this like evolutionary motion where like a lot of creativity is happening all at the same time, and people are like stealing and borrowing, the best ideas from each other. And I think, and then, like 5 years later, you have like the Dota and League of Legends that we know of. And so I think that type of evolutionary, content is something, we'd love to. I don't know if we quite have it with Nine Chronicles yet, but we definitely want to get there as our company mission.
Man, that is exciting. Like the concept of being able to fork a game and just, create your own element of it, take basically what's already there, fork it off, and then be able to add new elements to it. Because eventually you get to a point where communities start make more and more iterations within your own platform that you can then go and take and like find, like, let's say like eventually you get to this one fork and like people like, yeah, you have your original game, but then this one fork and it just explodes, right? It's still on your platform. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I think that could be really exciting feature for sure.
Awesome, man. So I know you got that game under wraps and it's going pretty well. As you look at other things that are coming to Planetarium, are there any other types of games that are in the pipeline or things that are coming to the platform soon that you think other people should know about?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been focusing on Nine Chronicles because we wanted to make sure that it could sustain users and have a safe market cap and make sure that it has a compelling user case where because building decentralized game is not easy, and we wanted to show studio that there's a very compelling case for it. And then so right now we are actively incubating two different projects. One and I think but it's in the earlier stages where we're still trying to figure out where we want to take this, because we are also demanding, existing studio developers that, hey, like this needs to be a community first game as opposed to something in the old model where, the company operates everything and owns everything. So I think we're in the sketching stages, because I think Nine Chronicles has, just proved that our technology is ready to be used by more studios. So we're actually, instead of saying, hey, like here's the game, we're trying to onboard as many studios as possible. We want to be pretty selective, because we definitely want to pay attention to each studio and each game design and make sure that the decentralized, I guess, vision is not just a ploy for getting attention from investors, whatever. So I think we're focusing on several projects, but also trying to build relationship with even larger studios so that eventually they can onboard and start thinking about decentralized gaming and also GameFi.
It's awesome. You're ultimately building the ecosystem of gaming, and it actually brings me to my next question that I think is really relevant to what's going on right now. So, to two different audiences right now. So if you're a hardcore gamer like myself, I enjoy playing video games. And you also have your game developers who are looking to build games and do that. How would you pitch this to myself and to a potential game developer of why they need to be paying attention to blockchain games and need to start getting involved sooner than later?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, from my perspective, GameFi is going to change things. GameFi is really going to change things, and we feel it deeply, because we've had our Nine Chronicles had its token since last year, when having a fungible token for a game was not fashionable at all. People are like, why should this have any mark? I mean, and then now we see stuff like Star Atlas or obviously Axie Infinity and projects like that. And I think the reason is, I think MMO designers of old, online game designers of old, would make some simulations, but base their numbers based on some like abstract ideas of how the economy should work. But now games are learning directly from DeFi, and they're like, oh man, this is how supply and demand should be structured. This is how an item actually proves its worth. Like we've with NFTs and with DeFi, we've been learning all about how abstract data can have value, and game is all about that. So I think you can give even like before you gain a really unique item in Diablo 2, you're like, wow, this is so cool, and maybe you can trade it for a couple like Storm Jordans. I mean, this is like for old time gamers, but like. Now, man, it's very, very different. Like when you gain something very unique in a blockchain game world, it hits you differently. Not only because it's like it's expensive or whatever. I'm not even concerned about the prices being into it. But like when you understand and when you feel the thrill coming from the owning a CryptoPunk or owning an ape, then it's like it hits you in a pretty different way than in previous gaming, and I think that when you have these like really impactful assets going inside the game and being traded and being in the crossroads where people connect, I think that's it's like a visceral feeling that it's very hard to replicate it in previous versions of online games, I think.
No, that's great. And I really think that sentiment is real and people are feeling it. And that's why if you look at a lot of the newest projects that are emerging in crypto, gaming is exploding. They're doing very well. And it's because people are seeing the true value of these ecosystems. And and the value that they bring to not only the community, but to the greater ecosystem. Because you're building blockchains and you're building ways for interoperability in a lot of ways that a lot of other companies haven't been able to figure out just yet. And I think that's really cool. And I think it's very necessary as we move this entire market and ecosystem forward. And so I think it's really awesome. I think what y'all are doing is incredible. But as we wrap up here, man, I always like to finish with two fun questions. First being, with all the information you have right now, if you go impart one or two pieces of wisdom to yourself when you first got it started in the crypto blockchain space, in the gaming space, what would you tell yourself?
That's a good question. I think, being honest about what your team is good at and, making sure that that value resonates with your audience is very important, because I think a lot of NFT projects or a lot of blockchain game projects coming up are just kind of like chasing the value. But, like if you are now trying to do play to earn, like how are you going to beat Axie Infinity, or how are you going to be like, do you want to be labeled even as a next Axie Infinity or whatever? I mean, it might be good for your project, but I think, I think people, the reason why people invest into certain projects is because it has its core value and it resonates with them deeply, even Doge, right? Like it's a meme coin, but I think that in itself carries value and has a very compelling, viral value inside the people who are, living in tens of thousands of crypto projects coming out every day. So, I think really identifying like how you are unique and actually making that as a viral message is probably something that we have focused on, but we could have focused on even better, and we could have talked about even better. And, I recommend with all the new blockchain projects coming out, like figure out your identity and be able to build a message around that. Yeah.
That's a great thought. I mean, and that goes with any and all business, and just even as you, I mean, dude, that's so relevant. Just brand identity, understanding your voice and understanding what is the actual like goal of what you're trying to accomplish, and building around that from bottom up. A lot of people kind of go on with the vision of here's the exciting thing, but don't necessarily look at how do you build the infrastructure and get people to buy into it. And so I think that is a really, really good thought there. But man, as we wrap up here, you've given us a lot to think about and a lot of good nuggets. What is a final thought that you want to leave with all of the listeners here today?
I think traditional jobs might become obsolete, or like you can have a lot of upside by working on crypto, but not just like as an employee, but you could be, for example, like if you're a coder or a programmer, you can be like working for 5 different blockchain games, and not just like playing games to earn, but you can be working for multiple projects, and you can be incubating, you can be investing multiple things at the same time, which I think is a really interesting way to engage their creative economy. So like if you're just watching, try to spend some time to get involved with projects that you fancy. I think people are always looking for creative people to join in and bring some kind of value in any way they can. We obviously, if you are interested in more interested in Chronicles, we'd be happy to like onboard and discuss things we could be working together on. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting time for the next 10, 20 years, where people get involved in multiple projects and start living in I don't want to say like more of a decentralized universe type of way, but yeah, I think there's a lot of really interesting opportunities out there.
I agree. And I think that's a fantastic final thought, especially around the concept of just taking action. One of the things that I like to bring up at the end of the day as we wrap up here is, for our listeners, if something resonated with you today, whether it's going and playing the game or figuring out how you can become part of a really engaged community, or just figuring out how can you, just like you said, there's what other kind of career where you can go and literally work with 3 or 4 or 5 different companies and it's completely okay. And you're doing what you love and like you're getting paid for it. Like, and then you can take some of that investment and invest in other things that you think could work. Like that's compound interest, that's equity. Like, man, that's wealth creation right there. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
So again, I think that's a fantastic final thought. I really appreciate your time with us today. What are ways that people can connect with you and learn more about everything going on at Planetarium?
Yeah, I think the best place is our Twitter, twitter.com/9chronicles. And we have a huge Discord community with over 30,000 people. And so that's one way to get involved. And check out the game and check out, you search for Nine Chronicles. I think we have a really good article on VentureBeat about the recent fundraising announcement, but also talking about our decentralized version of vision of gaming. So yeah, check those out. And thanks for listening.
Of course. Well, everyone, make sure you go check out Nine Chronicles. Again, Kijun, I really appreciate your time today. And for everyone listening, stay cryptocurrent.